going on, guys? It's Tyler.
Get closer to your mic.
It's Tyler!
There we go. And I'm Aaliyah, and this is Tim Below, where we discuss real topics in 10 minutes or less. Today, let's talk about white privilege. Now, before anybody gets defensive or feels like they need to click off the video...
It exists and you're wrong.
What we hope to do in this video is to offer you a different perspective. So don't...
The right perspective.
So don't feel like you can't listen to this. There's nothing wrong with being open to new information. There's nothing wrong with admitting, hey, I didn't think about it from this perspective. I misunderstood. This helped me to understand a little bit better. Or if you have any questions below. Questions, comment below. And, I'll try to answer them in like a next video or maybe on the post itself.
Wait, are we doing white privilege or just privilege in general? So we can talk about different privileges. Or
There are definitely different privileges. We can talk about
let's do white.
Many
people are sensitive about the white privilege.
Yeah. Let's talk about privilege in general, though. I think privilege in general, but we will start with white privilege.
Okay. What do you want to talk about?
So, here's an example that I always use to explain privilege, because a lot of people think, your first reaction as a white person when you hear that is, what privilege?
I had to work just as hard as anybody to get my dollar in my pocket. I didn't get anything handed to me. I wasn't spoon-fed.
Yes, that's kind of the typical response when we hear white privilege. Like, what privilege? I grew up poor. I had to work all my life. What privilege? So I want to give a story. One time I was having a really, really rough day. I was driving down Campbell Street, for those of you who live in Springfield. And my windows were down. This is like a year ago, too. My windows were down, and I was crying because just something had happened. Typical life stuff. Could happen to anybody. White, black, brown, whatever. And as I was at a stoplight, it turned green, and a car went by me and called me the N-word. Just randomly. And so the reason why I want to bring that up is because white privilege isn't saying that you're not going to have days like me where you're crying in the car, aka when life's hard. But on the bright side, the white privilege is that you'll never have somebody drive by in a car and call you a racial slur. So there you go.
But Aaliyah, what if they call me a cracker?
Well, okay, and here's why that's not the same thing. So the N-word has a long history of oppression of black people. We're not talking just about slavery, but we're talking about the after effects of slavery, the stereotypes, the discrimination, they're separate but equal, KKK killings, institutional racism, like what we practice, in law enforcement. A lot of stuff came after that. So there's a lot of history with the N-word because of the oppression that was within that. Fortunately, for people who are white, you guys don't have a history of being called crackers and going through slavery and, all the things after where black people were oppressing you or brown people were oppressing you. And before anybody says Irish slaves, clarification, there weren't Irish slaves in America. There were Irish indentured servants. There is a difference. Indentured servants worked for their freedom. Eventually they were free. It was kind of like a contract. And they were still seen as people. They could still go to court. Black people were seen as property. They couldn't even go to court. So,
well, Aaliyah, you bring up all this slavery, but I heard black people enslaved themselves.
Why are you doing that?
This is my impersonation of somebody who would...
We're kind of getting off topic.
But hey, you know what? Off topic because that's going to be an argument. Because they would say get over slavery because black people sold themselves. Well, what would you say to that?
Well, they didn't really have a choice. Whenever I took an African American history class, a lot of the black people, so they had, like the Africans, they had prisoners, but they weren't property. They were prisoners. They were still human. They were just prisoners. And whenever white people or colonizers came over and said, hey, give me your, I'll buy them off of you. And, black people were like, okay. They didn't really know all of what was going to go down. And then they'd come back a little bit later and say, hey, give me your prisoners. And the African tribes were like, I don't know. And the white people are like, ha ha ha, holding guns to them. Ha ha ha, give me your slaves. And so they really didn't have much of a choice. And even those African tribes that ended up giving away their prisoners or selling their prisoners, it wasn't long before colonizers decided to take them too, regardless of the treaty that they kind of had. So that's worth noting, but let's go back into it. So white privilege, again, dismantling that. It's not saying that you don't have a hard life in general, that you don't go through ups and downs as a human. It's just saying you don't go through
100%.
A sense of discrimination simply because you're white, at least systematically. It's not to say that you won't go through prejudice, but
I have a perfect example.
Okay, let's hear it.
Of a white person going through tough times, but it's not tough times like a black person. For instance, I'm going through tough times right now because I lost my job. But here's the thing. Those are tough times, and you'd say, Tyler, you're not privileged. You lost your job. But here's the thing. I didn't lose my job because I was white. Or I didn't get denied jobs because I was white. That's the difference between white people and black people. Black people get denied jobs because they're black. Or I don't know. I'm sure there are cases of black people who got jobs and different management took over, and they fired him over the other person because they're black.
Well, usually in disputes in the office, if it's a black, say like a black female versus a white male, typically it's not long after that the black female is let go. That is a common thing that we see. But so now just going off of white privilege, going in, there's many different forms of privilege. Say some privilege that we don't even know of, like growing up with both parents in the household. That is a privilege to have. Think about how differently your life would have turned out if you would have had one parent and not the other. You know?
Sent to the streets.
You know, so having two incomes coming in, no matter how small, was still two incomes compared to if you only had one. So there's a privilege of growing up in a double-parent household. There's a privilege in... What are you doing? Sorry, he's messing with stuff.
I was popping my toes, so I set my phone down.
What's another privilege that you would think of?
Parents with good credit.
Oh yeah, that is definitely having like very financially smart parents. Yeah, that's definitely an advantage. I know that my parents were never, and by parents, I grew up in a single parent household, so my parent never really stressed to me the importance of credit, and that was something that I had to learn later on with like zero resources, and was like, how do I do this? Where do I start? It was really, really difficult compared to you.
And another point I want to bring up, because the counter argument is, just because you're black or white doesn't mean you do or don't know about credit. But here's the thing, is that the people who don't know about credit are just in I wouldn't say a worse neighborhood, but a lower resource neighborhood where they don't focus on it. And that's the thing, like in these inner cities, it is mainly black people in these cities, and they're lacking resources in their education system that their parents missed out on too, and they don't get that.
Yeah, a majority of wealth comes through property, and more white people own property than black people in terms of ratio. Like, not ratio against each other, because that's obvious since black people are only 13% of the population.
Tell them why black people don't own property. You know where I'm going with this? Because the racist laws saying have to have like a grandfather that owned property, and then the thing is, the catch with black people is their grandfathers were slaves. Yeah, it's still... Or got arrested, or was there a prison thing? Like if you had a prison sentence, you couldn't own land?
Yeah, they're called housing laws. There's something specific. You guys feel free to look this up, but yeah, he's right. I completely forgot. Yeah, they had certain restrictions on people who could buy houses. And a lot of black people didn't meet that criteria because of something that was beyond their control. Again, this is a prime example of white privilege that we don't think of. Nobody is necessarily blaming you because you aren't aware that white privilege is a thing. But all they're saying is the first step is realizing there is a privilege and not being a person of color. And what can we do to lessen that disparity?
It's very hidden.
It's very systematic.
Yeah, like the laws that we just brought up, like you wouldn't have known unless someone said it straight to your face like we did, but we're running out of time.
Yes, so now that we are at 9:45, this is the point where we wrap it up. So I am Aaliyah.
And I'm Tyler, and white privilege exists.
That wasn't the end. But it's going to be, I guess, for today. See you guys next time.